For this very special occasion, we have none other than U.S. Congressman André Carson in town, and this is going to be an interactive session, so we're very excited about that as well. A conversation that needs to be had within our community. It's actually a conversation that should be had in many communities, but particularly in our community, and that's a conversation about the importance of being involved civically, civic engagement. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Zarina Nadir. I'm an attorney here in the community. I grew up here in this community, right here at this mosque, seen very different iterations of our carpet color. So I definitely am of this community, and I'm very excited that we are honored by the presence of the Honorable Carson in town. I'm going to share some information about the Congressman, and the way the program is going to run is we're going to have remarks from the Congressman, and then we are going to have an opportunity also for question and answer, so engagement, right? We're going to have that opportunity today. And then we are going to obviously break for prayer. There are also refreshments that are available following the program as well. So pull out the pen and paper or start taking those mental notes because we definitely want to have a great conversation this morning. Let me begin to share a little bit more information with you about the gentleman that we have here today. I know we all know the title, but there's some additional facts behind what brought André Carson to this position. And so I'm very excited. Actually, as the second Muslim elected to office in the history of this nation. Yes, mashallah. So, Congressman André Carson was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in early 2008 as part of a special election and was re-elected again in 2010, 2012, and 2014. Congressman Carson's love of public service was shaped in part by his grandmother, the late Congresswoman Julie Carson, who taught a young André the values of compassion, integrity, and determination. He got his political start serving on the Indianapolis City County Council, winning a special caucus of the Marion County Democratic Party to become counselor for the 15th Council District. Before his career as an elected official, Carson devoted himself to law enforcement and protecting Hoosiers, he's a Hoosier, across the state. He first served as a local board investigative officer for the Indiana State Excise Police for 9 years, covering 22 counties, before being detailed to the Indiana Department of Homeland Security's Intelligence Fusion Center in 2006, where he worked in an anti-terrorism unit to protect Indiana and the United States from terrorist threats at home and abroad. Congressman Carson serves on the House of Transportation Committee and is a ranking member on the Subcommittee on Economic Development. His areas of focus include domestic use of drones, maintaining and improving aviation safety, and developing intelligent transportation and high-speed rail. In January 2015, just a few short months ago, the Congressman was chosen to serve on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence by Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi. He is the first Muslim American to ever do so and will work to facilitate better coordination between state and local governments and the intelligence community, privacy regulations, and countering violent extremism. Most recently, the Protecting Cyber Networks Act passed, which included an amendment he authored to strengthen transparency into information sharing between the private sector and the government. Congressman Carson will continue to work for legislation to strengthen our schools and provide a better education for our kids. In March, he introduced the Young Americans Financial Literacy Act, a bill that seeks to promote the development of effective financial literacy curricula and educational models for students ages 8 through 24. Congressman Carson is also a rising member of House leadership. During the 114th Congress, Carson serves as a senior whip for the House Democratic Caucus, sits on the powerful Democratic Steering Policy Committee, and is a member of the Congressional Black Caucus Executive Leadership Team. These high-profile positions have allowed him to fight for Indiana's 7th Congressional District at the highest level of congressional leadership. We are very honored to have Congressman Carson here. This is a very timely visit also in light of some of the issues that the community has been dealing with. And at this time, I'm very honored, and help me please welcome Congressman André Carson.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, sister, for the wonderful introduction. I was talking to your mom before I walked in. It's always a pleasure to talk to her, and good to see you, and thank you for your advocacy and what you do for the community. Very excited to be here. This trip was scheduled months in advance, and it is timely because I was telling a group of friends last night, the way the Phoenix Muslim community handled the unfortunate protest, I think is an example for other communities, Muslim communities across the country to follow and to study. Why do I say that? I say that because you all demonstrated the right temperament, you showed compassion, you demonstrated a deep level of love for humanity, and that is the way of Rasulullah. And when we follow that example, which is the best example, we don't have to worry about proselytizing or trying to get people to come to our way of thinking. People are inspired and they're moved and their perceptions change, and we're just who we are as a unified ummah or community. I got my start, at least technically, I was influenced by my grandmother who was involved in politics in 1984. I was 9, soon to be 10. A gentleman by the name of Jesse Jackson was running for president. And my grandmother was a delegate to the then Democratic National Convention in San Francisco. And so I went out there with her and a lady by the name of Dr. Pat Brown at the time, Pat Payne now. And even though he didn't get the nomination, came back as a very young man, registering voters, even though I wasn't old enough to vote myself, phone banking. And when I was in high school years later, many of us wanted an African American studies class taught at Manual High School. And I remembered Mrs. or Dr. Pat Payne, who was on that trip, so I called her because she was an educator, renowned educator, and she said, I need you to get 1,000 signatures. The first 500, my white friends and the white students helped us get, and then the other numbers we got from the African American and Latino students. That was the beginning of kind of my activism at anti-police brutality rallies. This was at the height of the Rodney King era, in the midst of the crack cocaine era. And I remember one time getting arrested at 17, trying to prevent law enforcement from coming into the mosque. And I was never charged, being another young man. But that was a defining moment for me, because I ended up becoming a police officer. It's kind of funny. And so I've seen both sides of the spectrum. I ran for school board. I lost that race. I helped manage other campaigns, a judicial race, a city council race. I helped to get out the vote efforts for a mayoral race. And though my grandmother was in politics, I didn't grow up wanting to be a police officer. I knew that I loved helping people. I'm a people person. I like seeing lives impacted by the work that's done by people of goodwill. And I think for me, I tell people all the time, people say, well, I want to run for office. I say, why? They say, well, I'm smarter than this person or that person. Well, you can be smart, but if you don't care about people genuinely, your intelligence will not impact their lives. You may get a temporary narcissistic satisfaction, but if you don't truly love people, then you can't really serve or help people. So our whole effort, I've been in Congress now for over 7 years, and me along with Keith Ellison, we've worked together. We just sent a letter to the Attorney General's office, Loretta Lynch, calling for an investigation into why those protesters were there. And I think it was really a violation, and my hope is that a proper investigation will unearth some truths about the motivation behind the protests, which I think was orchestrated in advance, and really highlight the fact, which I knew since my days at Homeland Security and counterterrorism, was that the largest internal threat to our country is not coming from the Muslim community. It's coming from white supremacist organizations and far right-wing groups. But that isn't to say that there aren't issues in our community, because there are issues in our community. There are folks who claim to be Muslim, who I believe misrepresent the faith. There are folks who claim to be Muslim who have misapplied the precepts and concepts and ideas of what the Prophet had in mind. And I think that we need to have an honest discussion. There are billions of Muslims in this country, in this world, pardon me. And although we are monotheistic, we are not a monolith. We have different ideas. There's a spectrum. Some of us are on the far end in terms of being liberal, and many are very conservative. And I think what we're seeing now is that groups who are extremists and who have a political agenda, though they use the language of religion, they have perverted the religion of Islam, and they are preying on people who are disillusioned and feel a sense of hopelessness. And they are recruiting those folks who have unmet needs and using them, I believe, for evil purposes. And that is unfortunate. I was most pleased by seeing the reaction of the interfaith community coming to the defense of Muslims, which tells me that your interfaith efforts have been superb. Reaching out to Christians, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, even non-theists. And the goodwill that was evident really showed not only nationally but internationally. And I think that we have a long way to go, but I think that there are opportunities for our community. In the political space, I was told that there are nearly 100,000 Muslims in the greater Phoenix area. There's no reason why we can't have more Muslims represented in our city council here in Phoenix. We can't have more Muslims in our state house. There should be Muslims on the school board, zoning boards, one day a mayor, maybe even a governor, members of Congress, coming out of Arizona. It's a great state. But as long as we see ourselves as less than the first, we will never step into our rightful place. And we're making contributions each and every day. You go to any major hospital in this country, and you'll find a Muslim physician. Go to some of our major courtrooms, you'll find Muslim attorneys and judges. My father-in-law, Judge Shahid, happens to be one of them. He was the first elected Muslim judge in the country, Judge David Shahid. But there are many more stories out there, and we have to tell our own story. We can't rely on others to tell our story. So I'm happy to be here. I can't wait to hear your questions, and thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
So at this time, we'd love to take some questions from the audience. No questions are off.
No, I'm a no-limit soldier. Let's go. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Explain the term whip and how did, and what does the whip do?
Yeah. Each party has a whip. There is the whip, and there are deputy whips, of which I'm a deputy whip, and there are regional whips. I'm a regional whip too. And the whip is responsible for whipping support for votes. So I come and say, Sister Farida, where are you on this education bill? Are you a yay? Are you a nay? Are you an undecided? And I would get a tally of the people that I'm assigned to whip, and I would take it back to the whip so we could at least see where our membership is. And if the numbers are tight, we'd increase the whipping, figuratively speaking. I mean, it's similar to how we do in the Masjid. You know, when someone's running for a particular position, if there's an election held, people choose who they want to support, and if the numbers are close, you send emissaries or you make calls yourself to kind of lean on people. So the whip is in charge with whipping up support for a particular piece of legislation. or persuading someone to switch their vote. Yes, sir. Wa alaikum salam. I'm a former cop. You're walking up on me with your hands in your pockets. All right. Yes.
Allow me to tell you what's happened in the street in the reaction of the street against the Muslims. It's a reflection of what happens in the White House. It's a general policy of the country, foreign affairs. It's translated automatically for the reaction against Muslims on the streets. It encourages people to that you stand
So you're saying, thank you. So you're saying that the protests outside of the Masjid were a result of anti-Muslim sentiments in the White House?
That's what I think. Yes. From the news, it's a reflection of what's happening in the news.
I would push back and say that those who were protesting outside of the Masjid think that Obama's a Muslim. Many of them. And they see that his presidency represents the rise of Islam, the rise of minority groups. The coup, I think you mentioned the coup in Egypt, dealing with Morsi, right? What I will say is that we saw in Egypt the so-called or the Arab Spring. And the Arab Spring happened under Morsi's watch, correct? This tells me that the people of Egypt were dissatisfied with their leadership and their representation. Yes, he was elected by the people, but those same people, shortly after he was elected, felt that he was ineffective. They felt like he misrepresented Egypt's future, and in their minds, he did not address the growing joblessness.
Which people you are talking about? Those are people that were driven by the military for a specific purpose. Those are the movie stars that have their own agenda and their own way of living. It's not the people of the country. That those people do not represent the people of the country. The majority of the people, they know that Morsi was having problems and difficulties in solving the problems of the country because there were so many problems. They know that he did not live up to their expectations, but that was not a reason for them to take an action to topple him down or kill the number of people that were killed everywhere and do the burning in the Masjid and the mosques everywhere in Egypt. That was a massacre against humanity. That was a crime against humanity.
Thank you, brother. Let's step up here. Let's just allow the Congressman to make his remarks. Thank you.
Well, I don't think that we should be in the business of telling Egypt or any sovereign nation who their leaders should be. I think that based on polling data that was taken nationwide in Egypt, at that time, people didn't feel comfortable with Morsi's leadership. They felt that he was out of place, and they felt that philosophically and ideologically, he was out of sync with the majority of Egyptians. There were pockets of support, significant pockets of support that supported him, but overwhelmingly so, it appeared, based on the polling data, that the people did not support him.
With all your history, Congressman,
What do you have to say? Because we don't want to monopolize the time.
is that the way to change the leadership? Is what happened in Egypt the correct way to change the leadership, even if the people were dissatisfied?
Well, he was elected by the people. You're right.
In the United States, we know how many people were dissatisfied with George Bush, but they waited for him for his term and to finish, and the end. Then they changed him through the elections.
So what, so,
Then what happened is not democratic in Egypt?
well, of course not.
Okay, so that's, why does the United States support the new regime?
Well, I think what's troubling is that you can't, if I could use the language of Lauren, people want to have their cake and eat it too. You can't have it both ways. On one end, you don't want the U.S. intervening in the affairs of other countries. And then when these countries make decisions about their own private affairs, then you want the U.S.'s support. So which one is it? The administration condemned the coup, if you recall. The president said very clearly that it was an undemocratic approach and it was improper. But then he reiterated the fact that it is not the U.S.'s policy to interfere with the affairs of other nations. So we can debate this all day, but I'm assuming you're from Egypt?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, God, may Allah bless you and your country's health and future. I was there not too long ago with the Congressional Black Caucus, and we met with Sisi, and we raised some of these points. In fact, we talked about the release of Brother Muhammad Sultan, who has been released. But you know, while I think we're going to talk about some more international things while I'm here, I think that often we lose the focus on what's going on in America. We have educational issues, we have rising illiteracy rates, we have joblessness, and I think that there's a space for Muslims to address those issues. Oftentimes, while I think your point is very important, and thank you for raising it, it's safe to talk about Egypt, it's safe to talk about Syria, it's safe to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian question. All are critically important, very important. We have to talk about these issues. Hope we talk about them today. But we cannot lose sight of the realities that are happening each and every day. When it comes to police brutality, our community is very silent. It's easy to intellectualize and talk about things that are happening thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean. But when it comes time to talk about issues that are impacting our local communities, we're not vocal enough. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just want to give some additional parameters on the questions. I want everyone to know, and Congressman Carson, no question is off limits. We definitely want this to be an opportunity for engagement, for dialogue, but we do want to give everyone an opportunity, or as many people an opportunity, to share their comments or their questions as possible. So I'm going to ask for your respect in asking a question. If you have a comment, keep the comment short, and to forgive me and allow me if I do have to cut you off. It is nothing. It's nothing personal. I'm just making that statement now. It's not personal, but in order to maintain the flow of the program, we do have prayer as well. We want to make sure that the event goes smoothly. So just asking for your forgiveness initially. And appreciate Congressman Carson. We're going to allow him to make his comments. So these are just a few. I'm a lawyer. I give some ground rules. Okay, so work with me, people. All right. I saw Dr. Nadir's hand, and I also saw Brother Fayyad's hand, and I also see Sister Sarsour's hand here as well. So we'll go to Dr. Nadir, and then we'll work around the room. Thank you.
I heard something about financial literacy, and that piqued my attention. But that's certainly...
Thank you for that question. I introduced a bill not too long ago that deals with financial literacy. It's a financial literacy bill, and it's a non-traditional bill in that it seeks to provide grant opportunities through the Treasury Department. And I've met with superintendents. My wife's a principal, school principal. I've met with educators who say, we would love to teach financial literacy in our schools, but we're already stretched too thinly because of testing requirements. So as a result, this bill attempts to allow NGOs and nonprofits to partner with the business community and offer competitive grants to the Treasury Department to fund these efforts, to really talk about how we can increase our financial literacy in this country. There are too many kids who are going off to college who are ending up with huge amounts of debt. More kids are graduating high school with amounts of debt. Many Americans, period, 9 to 90, or at least 19 to 99, have a lot of debt. And the question becomes, how do we increase our levels of financial literacy and reduce the amount of burden that one incurs through mortgages, through credit cards, and through the different obligations that we accrue throughout life. And I was very inspired by the work of Dr. Muhammad Yunus and his transformational efforts to focus on microloans. And so we've met with banks, we've met with credit unions who have instituted their own micro-lending apparatus in helping to empower small businesses, particularly women and minority-owned businesses. So that's been a part of our work. It's a great question. Thank you. Yes.
Brother Freya.
It's a two-part question. First part regarding community service and involvement. Now, this is something that the Muslim community has a lot of potential in. What's your take on that, on how valuable it is to make the community, like a Muslim home in the United States, more valuable to the whole society in the United States through community service? And then secondly, how serious or how impactful are the calls to members of Congress or members of the House in case of conflict? Like last year when we had the conflict in Gaza, we rallied people to call the Congress. Does that make a difference? Does that sway people in Congress in any way from your experience?
No, that's a great question. I think calls are critically important. I think emails are important. I think letters are important. I think voting is even more important. I think fundraising is important too. I think all of those things are very important. I think though we have to be consistent, because to the point about Gaza, I was very critical of the Israeli government and their aggression, military aggression against the people of Palestine. And I didn't hear from any Muslims. And Keith has the same issue. We talk about it often. And as soon as someone thinks that I'm voting against Muslims, they assume there's an email chain that goes out and everyone's upset with me. I think it speaks to the ignorance and the emotionalism and the impulsivity of our community. It's not to say that I'm above reproach or critique, because I'm not. But it is to say that our political literacy is very low. And the same fervor and organizational acumen that was demonstrated during that time should also be demonstrated when members of Congress speak very boldly in the face of critique, especially during that time. And I think that we have to be just as outraged about homelessness, joblessness, racism, and bigotry. And I think what's happening in the community is that we're having to grow at an accelerated rate. You look at pre-9/11, Islam was the fastest growing religion in the country. And though it was the fastest growing religion in the country, there were still unaddressed issues that our community had been dealing with as it related to racism. You had African American Muslims or those of African descent who couldn't get the greetings returned at the Masjid on the jum'a. You know, and it behooves me, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that he saw Bilal, that Ethiopian, one of his companions, he saw his footsteps entering paradise before his own. And even in his last sermon, he said there is no superiority over the Arab or the non-Arab, the white over the black. I mean, it was that important that he had to note it. And I think that when you have, the Quran says, I made you in tribes and nations so you may know one another. Whenever there's an attempt to learn the deen, but it feels like people mistake Arab nationalism for Islam. I think that's problematic. Because, you know, even though my uncles and imam, my great aunts and uncles are Muslim, and my great grandmother on my dad's side was Muslim, I didn't become a Muslim. Last thing I wanted to be, respectfully, in my life was an Arab. I wanted to be who I was. That's of African descent, because I knew the history. You understand, of Mansa Musa, and I didn't want to be other than myself. I didn't want to dress other than who I really was, because that wasn't what Islam was for me. But to answer your question, I think the activism that was demonstrated should manifest itself in other areas. And everybody in this room is intelligent. Everyone in this room is smart. I just think that the world is watching our community now. And we still have to push the issue as it relates to the mistreatment of Palestinians. We still have to be equally critical of Hamas when they fire rockets into Jerusalem and kill men, women, and children. And that was a whole thing that came up last year when I supported to continue funding for the Iron Dome. It wasn't against Palestinians, it was because of the information that I had. When Hamas fires rockets into Jerusalem, they aren't killing anyone else but Bedouins who are Muslim. That's who's getting killed. Bedouins are getting killed. So, as a former police officer, as someone who has access to the information, I don't want to see anybody killed unjustly. So, I think that when we don't understand nuance and we pick up the paper and see something without looking at the entire picture, we get outraged and then we go back into our lives. It's inconsistent. But I think folks like yourself, brother, should help lead the effort in terms of helping to educate the community. It's a good question, though.
What are some ways for individuals?
Your last name is Sarsor? Are you related to Linda Sarsor? From Brooklyn. Are you from Brooklyn? She's a good sister. She goes in on Facebook.
What are some ways for individuals who are not involved in political careers getting involved with officers or
That's a great question. I tell people all the time, identify a campaign that shares your values. You may not agree with their issues 100% of the time, but volunteer for a city council race, a mayoral race, a congressional race. Go door to door. It really gives you a sense of what people are thinking. Phone bank, call people. If that's not your thing, if you love writing, help develop policy positions. If there's a particular issue area that you're crazy about and you love it, help an elected official understand that issue more deeply and more broadly. And you'd be surprised, your participation and help will build a reservoir of, my brother, handsome guy, come on up front. I like this guy, something about him. Come on up front, man. I like this guy. He's moving around. I like this guy. He got a cool walk. He walks like Obama, doesn't he? Cool brother right there. So I for someone like yourself, I would say volunteer and really learn the process. I'm like him, brother. What's your name, man? Philly. Oh, Philly's in the house. I feel safe now. Have a seat. Yeah, I feel real safe now. Good to see you, brother. Can you post up there, my brother, in case somebody wants to run up? Okay, all right. Thank you, brother. All right. And really volunteer, because through volunteering, you'll really see where your interests lie. If it's running for public office yourself, which I think would be a phenomenal thing. We need a lot of Muslim sisters running. Or if it's being behind the scenes as a chief of staff, as a legislative director, as a finance director, as an executive assistant, just really helping to push the mark and to control the agenda. But you don't know until you jump into the fray.
So at this time, thank you so much. We are going to actually do the advance.
Well, Congressman Ellison and I don't know if you were here when I said it, we sent a letter to the newly appointed Attorney General calling for a federal investigation of the protesters. And so we're waiting to hear back from the Attorney General about the investigation. I think members of Congress, they're mixed about what happened in Texas. I think many well-thinking Republicans and Democrats know that that shooting is not reflective of the religion, but others feel like it's more reinforcement or affirmation that in their minds, Muslims are a threat to our society. But I think for the most part, members of Congress personally are far more sensible than their brands would suggest. Because at the end of the day, people are people. And so I think you can't tell how knowledgeable they are as it relates to Muslims, given their rhetoric, because sometimes their rhetoric doesn't match who they are as people. So it's always mixed, but at the end of the day, there hasn't been much discussion. I think that the greater discussion should be, what will we do as a community to take control of our own images in the way we're being portrayed, because we can't rely on others to tell our story. We have to tell our own story.
There was a question over here on the side. Someone
Yes.
here, and then
Wa alaikum salam. Yes, ma'am. Me and Brother Imam were just talking about that. You want to take this one, brother? Quickly. 1 minute, beloved.
Okay, listen, what we do, what I do as Imam, when the people take Shahada, I try to educate them. The problem. So what we try to do is teach them the Sunnah wal Jama'at, the ways of our religion, that way to ground them. See, because Islam now is the fastest growing religion in the world, and especially in this country. So this is what we try to do in that way. In regards to our foreign brothers and sisters, welcome to the club as far as oppression and discrimination. Okay? Get used to it. Now, in regards to, you also know that when people draw pictures about the Prophet ﷺ and all this, people understand that Rasulullah Muhammad ﷺ was praying by the Kaaba. And one of the Quraysh had cut open the camel and put the entrails on his back. And he's still in sujood. And his daughter Fatima, radiallahu anha, came and took it off of him. And he did not exact retribution or revenge. And he said, I have not been commanded to fight yet. So Allah is with the sabirin, the patient. Ameen.
Thank you. And if I could add on to what the brother said so eloquently, thank you, Brother Imam, for that. I think that the arrogance has always been there, especially pre-9/11, and kudos to you, sister, for identifying the arrogance. You know, sometimes people who portray an arrogance, it's really an insecurity and a cover for, at least in their minds, inadequacy. But I think, you know, sometimes to think that you're better than anyone because of your race is really a disease. And I think that in order to combat that disease, you need knowledge to combat that disease. So as the sister talked about having iftars with non-Muslims, I think that we should have more forums where African Americans can talk and sit down with immigrant brothers and sisters. I think that'd be an important conversation. I think sometimes Arab nationalism can be more insidious than white supremacy. Yes, sir.
How many people are trying to assume that religion is what people in the streets? How do you improve this?
Well, I think people will always have their opinions about who we are. And just because you're religious, that doesn't make you a bad person. And because you're religious, it doesn't make you better than someone who's not as religious. I think that you just have to, I think the Rasulullah, to Brother Imam's point, had the best example. When the Quraysh were trying to insult him when he was at the Kaaba, he maintained the highest level of dignity. And I think even as someone who is deeply religious, we cannot allow, or you should not allow your religiosity to become a cover for the mistreatment of others. You can't use the fact that, someone may have the prayer mark on their forehead, they may wear a thobe, they may have a long beard, they may pray, they may make extra prayers, they may be a hafiz. And I think that that is beautiful in the context that they don't become arrogant, and they don't use their religion to run people away or turn people away or make themselves feel better. I've seen people come to the masjid for jum'a and leave more depressed than when they came into it, because the sentiment and the tone of arrogance and the religiosity was so heavy. People are already dealing with enough in their day-to-day lives, and they want to come to a spiritual house for some relief, not for judgment, not to be abused or berated. And so your religiosity or your demonstration or your commitment or your fervor is really about your relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if someone is doing it because they're trying to show that they're holier than thou, then it becomes a competition. We're encouraged to compete in righteousness, but we're not encouraged to compete to make others feel less than. But I'd say if you're devoted, stay devout. If that makes you feel good and strengthens your connection to Allah, and others are inspired because of your devotion, then more power to you, my brother. More power. Keep doing your thing, man, because someone may be inspired by you to study the deen more deeply. They may be inspired by your piety, that they may want to change the world in a different kind of way. I would just encourage those who are pious or seeking piety or a greater connection with God to not let that leak over and become a vain demonstration of one's holiness or even narcissism. But keep on doing your thing, my brother. I'm not saying you in particular, but yeah. I'm sorry, beloved. Well, I think being a Muslim and doing the works and modeling yourself after the model of the Prophet and what's described in the Quran, that is a form of da'wah without you having to force someone to convert or understand the faith. That in and of itself is da'wah, your demonstration of goodwill. When the protesters were out there and Muslims were acting with nobility and grace and dignity, that was a form of da'wah. Because you saw the one gentleman who came to the masjid with his dad, and he had a different view of Muslims after he left. And so I think as long as we can continue in the vein of being focused on making our communities better, being more engaged in the process, not being so reactionary, I think the larger community will eventually respect us even more so. But the work that has already been done interfaith-wise cannot be refuted, because we saw the interfaith community come out in mass because of the great works that have been done by you all already, and really stand up against the protesters and say, we will not accept this. These folks are our attorneys, they're our physicians. I work with this guy, I work with this sister, she's brilliant, she's bright, she's a proud American, and that's the way it should be.
Brother here and then Brother Omar.
Thank you, brother. Speaking of community, I serve on the school board.
Thank you.
It's for a district that encompasses various demographics, including Somali and Sunni. So during your election campaign, what tactics, for lack of a better word, did you utilize to garner support from the community? As I faced one similar to Ferguson, whereas it's a lackluster desire to get involved.
First, let me thank you for your commitment to public service. I remember I used to go to the masjid, this was before 9/11, and try to register people to vote. And they say, oh, astaghfirullah, Brother Salim, oh, brother, this is haram. We don't vote, Ak. No, brother, you can't do that. And then 9/11 hit, we looked up, we didn't have anybody on the school board. We didn't have people on zoning boards. city councils, let alone Congress. And so I think that if you're seeking public office, first of all, let me say the first group, even before the UAW, steelworkers, any organized labor, I got a check from a gentleman by the name of Alan Hogan, but the first group to ever do an event for me was a group of Muslims. They were South Asian, Indo-Pakistani group. And if you're relying on Muslims to get you in office, that's probably not the best start, as you already know, to getting into office. Because I think we're that far behind developmentally, politically. But a handsome brother like yourself and smart brother like yourself, man, I think the community will be attracted to your own personal passion, and then let the Ummah follow later. But I think you're going to have to lead the way and probably set up a workshop for brothers and sisters in the community about what it means to be politically engaged, because you know we're not raising the money as we should, we're not voting as we should. So it's going to take folks like you to really lead us in the right direction and conduct a small workshop that's succinct, that's clear, talking about the meaning of registering to vote, talking about why it's important to become a precinct committee person or being a part of the school board. We complain about our educational system, but we won't run for school board to make a change, to have a say in how funds are being diverted, how resources are being allotted. And you know, I got into trouble a few years ago for highlighting the brilliance that's happening in Muslim schools. You know, Fox News was, I said some controversial things, but I used the term madrasa, which just means school in Arabic. We know this. But what I was saying simply was, with the rising, we are graduating kids from our high schools who are functionally illiterate. We were at a Muslim school in Chicago. Last week, I spoke at the graduation, and these kids are not only bilingual, they're trilingual. They're speaking English, Spanish, and Arabic, and they're going on to Ivy League institutions. And so that reaffirmed my point that we should not be ashamed of who we are and the contributions that we're making to society. But as long as we're well adjusted and we're getting by, and we see another Muslim at the mall, we don't give the greetings, we just keep on walking by. People see that fear and they see that self-doubt and self-hate. So if we don't respect ourselves, how can we respect other communities to give the Ummah props? I think moms, you're going to be in trouble if you don't let moms say something. But that's the question. You're right. All right.
Thank you. No, that's okay. I just wanted to add one of the things is our own experience and our own experience. Like, we didn't know before that we could go to a legislative district.
You guys for making those points. Someone raised a question last night. What can African American Muslims bring to the table? I forget the question. Where's Yasser? I forget the question. What do African American Muslims bring? And because the immigrant community is known for raising the money, but I think votes and understanding the political system coming out of the civil rights movement, I think you have that on the ground knowledge base.
And having a commitment to go out and vote.
That's right.
That's why I go to vote, because people die.
That's right.
We had blood, sweat, and tears so we can vote. So for any of us to sit here and not vote just really is a travesty. I'm sorry.
I mean, no, that's it, Mom. That's it. No, that's it. That's it.
You gotta vote, because if not, we wouldn't have this opportunity to practice our religion, to be here. The Immigration Act would not have been passed.
That's right.
Lots of things would not have
That's right.
happened. People didn't die for us to be able to vote.
That's it.
Brother Amar, and then Brother.
First of all, thank you so much for being on.
I learned a lot from watching my grandmother. I think the sisters made a great point. Go to the legislative district meetings, become a precinct committee person, vote, mobilize, host debate forums here at the Masjid. If a person's running for city council, or if there are numerous people, host a candidates night here and hear what they have to say, Democratic, Republican, Independent, and make your own decision about who you want to support. Because this is a 501c3, you cannot legally make an endorsement as a masjid, but you are free to host a candidates forum. And then outside of this context, have small fundraisers for candidates that you like. And if there's someone who's introducing anti-Sharia legislation, you support their opponent just to send a message. And I think other communities have been successful historically. Our Jewish friends are brilliant at this. I just gave a speech at the Jewish town hall. I had a town hall at the Jewish Community Center. They're brilliant. They've been brilliant. And other groups are brilliant at leveraging their voting bloc to gain political power. And the last point I would say is, we should identify people in our own community who we want to support to run for public office, based on expertise, based on knowledge, based on passion, based on their commitment to serving others. And I think from what I've seen today, we may have to start with some of the sisters first. Brothers, we got a long way to go, man, because the sisters, respectfully, they've got the blueprint. I mean, you've heard them speak already. Sister wants to talk about the racism with the immigrant community. Another sister is telling you to go to the ledge meetings. I mean, the sisters have it mapped out, as women usually do. So I think we maybe should start grooming a sister to run for office, though, brother. I think so.
We had a follow-up, one more question, and then we'll go to the president.
As you saw, those people, veteran people, came in. Yes, first of all, they came in to say, well, we just want to, have a rally to express our, opinion without the title, to the amendments and what have you. Although, in their Facebook notes and what have you, they said, we will be armed. We will come to that rather armed. Yet, with all the Homeland Security came in, the FBI, we got involved into this ahead of time, and they did their diligent, research and what have you. They said, we will allow it. We will allow it to happen. Although they knew ahead of time that's going to happen. It was armed. If you see all those pictures, as if like, very well armed. When I say that, with the all that type of equipment that they can use. Now, in the other hand, if any Muslim, right, they say, okay, we will do a rally, right? If they do it similar way as those Patriot people came out to that protest, guess what? Probably the turnout will be totally different. And they will be even accused, they will be followed, they will be even imprisoned, if they did such a thing. And we heard a lot of, elected officials here in the valley saying that we'll protect both. We'll protect, those worshipers to go to their mosque, okay, to be safe and what have you. We also will protect those people who express their opinion in that process, although they were armed. So what is your perspective in such a way, how this one was handled? Was it really just the way how it was handled, the way how it was? Or it should be really handled differently and something the community, our Muslim community, should do something about it as far as maybe to file a lawsuit or to file something legal action towards that?
Well, as I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, that's one of the reasons why Congressman Ellison and I sent a letter to the Attorney General calling for an investigation. And the man made an interesting point, and we all got a chuckle, but there's an eerie truth about what he said when he said, welcome to the club. Historically, we have seen mobs outside of homes. We have seen mobs, armed mobs, outside of churches, black churches, telling folks to go back to Africa, go back to where you came from. We don't want you in this community. Bombed our churches for little girls, absolutely. And so I think that, as the sister was saying, speaking about the arrogance of the immigrant community and not listening to the African American Muslim pleas for the past few decades about this kind of thing.
So trying not to be arrogant, racist, try to be civilly engaged. One of the main people who attended the interfaith support the Muslim community gathering was also representing the LGBT group. So these Muslims yourself being a Muslim politician, how do you tackle this?
There's nothing for me to tackle. I'm against any form of discrimination. You know, in Indiana, we saw where our governor signed a controversial bill into law that would allow businesses to decline service to members of the LGBT community. And I condemned it and I spoke out against it because if I give them a pass on that, when it comes time to discriminate against Muslims and Hindus, who's going to be with us? And so I think discrimination is discrimination in any form. There were many people when African American, and I'm not comparing the two, be clear, but when African Americans were discriminated against, many people used the Bible to justify the discrimination. They misinterpreted a passage about Ham and used that to speak for not only black people, but brown, yellow, red people as being the cursed seed of Ham, which is a misapplication of scripture, but that's another story. And so I as an elected official, I as a Muslim first, will not stand for discrimination in any form. Because it's LGBT today, African Americans again and again tomorrow, Arabs the next day, Jewish brothers and sisters the following day. Where does it stop? And if you allow that, then that gives cover for someone to say, I don't want Muslims in my establishment because they're unbelievers. They don't believe in Christianity. They're not saved, so therefore I feel like they should not be serviced. So I think the premise for me is to not allow any form of discrimination to be codified and supported. We saw where African Americans were denied service in Woolworth in the South. Separate drinking fountains, justified hundreds of years prior by declaring, and they declared in the Constitution that black people were 3/5 of a human being. So if you're already looking at fellow human beings as being subhuman, you've already got your cover of justification for enslaving them, because guess what? They're not human anyway. So for me, my mind is discrimination I'll leave the scholarly debates up to the scholars. And at the end of the day, Allah is the best knower and the best judge. So I'm not a scholar, I'm not a hafiz, I'm just your brother who's elected to office. And my premise is I will fight against any form of discrimination.
There is a question actually that we have, a paper that came from one of the sisters. We'll have the time to take maybe one or two questions. So I see Brother Amar, or anyone else who has a question. Okay, I'm going with that. Okay, so inshallah that'll be the last question. So this question came from the audience, one of the mothers here.
Question is about English literacy.
New language acquisition.
Yes, the ESL program is there, and a lot of times they don't mind. A lot of times, like IRC, we ask them specifically. I don't think they.
Well, he was talking about police action shootings and what's behind the mentality of a lot of these police officers, and as one who worked in law enforcement, what are my thoughts? And I've seen the spectrum from being in the police academy to seeing the mentality and to working side by side. I worked with some good law enforcement officers, and I worked with some people who I personally felt were doing law enforcement a disservice. There are a lot of police officers, I think most of them have good intentions of serving the community and protecting the community. There are others, however, who I think have been raised in certain parts of the state or certain parts of the country. They've been raised with a negative opinion of minorities, particularly African Americans. And the images that they have seen throughout their lives of African Americans have not been positive. And I think that deep-seated fear manifests itself in some of these shootings where you have officers who are afraid. And a lot of police agencies need to revise or change their standard operating procedures. There's a 1+1 theory in law enforcement. If a person charges you and they're unarmed, you should meet them with equal or greater force. So if an unarmed person approaches you, you subdue the threat unarmed as well. If that person has a weapon, you equalize the threat with a baton or a taser, and of course if they have a firearm, you meet that force with an equal threat or greater. That's not particularly utilized in most cases. We're seeing police officers shoot young men in their backs, and we're seeing cases where these incidences are caught on tape, and when a judgment is handed down from a jury, it doesn't appear to be equitable. And my concern is that the recruitment process is flawed. Many of the instructors who are teaching cultural sensitivity trainings have gone through an 8-hour course. They've become certified, and many of these people who are teaching the training need training themselves because I think that they're culturally insensitive. And they may have taken the course to get a promotion or to get extra pay. But I think the recruitment efforts have to change. I think we need more African Americans who come from these communities that are being policed on the force, who understand the cultural nuances of these different communities. I think more Muslims should participate in law enforcement. There are numerous terrorist attacks that are thwarted each and every day that you'll never hear about, and it's because of Muslims who are participating. And it is clear that law enforcement has become too militarized, and law enforcement, the mentality has to be unearthed and changed. The first manifestation of what we see of police officers started hundreds of years ago as slave catchers. And I think now we're seeing a display where black men are targeted, have always been targeted. You know, I mentioned earlier how I was arrested from trying to prevent cops from coming to a mosque. And this was during the Rodney King era. And how it escalated was the police officer he said some stuff he shouldn't have said to us. I think we can read between the lines of what he said. But now that social media is at its height, you have police officers who are more reluctant, and now that we're opening a place where we're going to see more body cameras placed on police officers, you're going to see, you hopefully will see different outcomes. But before, a lot of police officers weren't being punished for the things that they would say to incite these things. And you know, we talked about arrogance and insecurity earlier, and you know, racism is a cousin of fear and insecurity. And when you have people who have been their thoughts and ideas are reinforced within the law enforcement culture, it manifests itself when they encounter African American men. But until there's an outrage, until there are protests in mass, I don't think we're going to see the results. I'm happy that we're seeing more people become a part of denouncing these kinds of activities, but this is a space where Muslims can participate. If Muslims are only outraged when protesters show up to the Masjid, then to me that's insufficient. If we're only comfortable talking about things that are happening in Egypt, which are important, to me that's insufficient. If we're unwilling to talk about police action shootings in Compton, in Ferguson, in New York, LA, and Phoenix, we have a long way to go. But I think it's going to take a change in the way we let our police departments recruit. We need to have more Muslims and African Americans on these police review boards. We need to have more minorities and women during the recruitment process. And I even think that we need to have a forum where we could have law enforcement, and I know this is happening already, talk to the Muslim community, but in a way that isn't transactional. Law enforcement shouldn't be allowed to come to the masjid and talk to us as a vehicle to then spy on our community. It has to be a reciprocal relationship that's healthy, and it has to be an even exchange. And the same thing has to happen with the black community.
In the interest of time, I hope the brothers here who had
Community is underutilized. Underutilized. I mean, we have some great speakers in our community, great educators in our community, great communicators in our community, but for some reason, and we appreciate those people who consistently come out, by the way, and those people who take the time to even conduct these workshops. But I don't think we're tapping into some of our folks who are web designers, who are IT folks, who could give an awesome presentation and make it more attractive. I mean, if me taking time out of my day requires me to sit through a warmed over message, I'm not likely to show up. There are probably better things for me to do, no matter how important the cause may be or appear. If the message is not succinct, if it tends to meander and it's not clear and it doesn't inspire me to want to come back again, or if the workshop is saying it's about XYZ, but then when you get there 5 minutes into it, it's about something else, and then you're feeling badgered or being made to feel guilty about something else unrelated, then people aren't likely to show. And honestly, they shouldn't show. If as a Muslim, my obligation rests in the pillars and what I'm required to do as a Muslim, and that's it. Most people will just do that, if they can even do that. But to do the extra stuff, I think it's going to have to be much more attractive. I think that's how you entice people. You know, one of the things that the Muslim community and faith communities are trying to combat as it relates to extremist groups who are recruiting, their recruitment efforts are very glossy. They almost rival the Army's recruitment commercials. And I think that we have to have our own recruitment efforts that are positive, because I think the better message is found here with sensible Muslims. But as long as we have people who, I mean, the sisters who have spoken, the educators, the brothers who have spoken, they excite me. I lit up hearing what you guys had to say. Then there are other people who may be sincere, but their presentation is not the best presentation. You know, I tell Muslims all the time who come to Capitol Hill or even go to the State House in Arizona or even Indiana, and they meet with legislators about issues. I say, talk about things that are relevant. Education, jobs, so on and so forth. If you're leading the conversation talking about halal farming, though it's important, that's not going to retain the attention of a legislator because it's too nuanced. Start with having because the city or the state is a shared enterprise. We all pay taxes, so we all have a vested interest in its success. So talk about the things in which we all can buy into and go from there. But I think we really need to tap into how many web designers do we have in the room? Who can design a website in this room? Look at that. Have you been asked to help out with web design? Is he pretty good? He's good. Does it look like Xbox One, or does it look like an Atari? How many people here are good writers? How many people are good writers? Look at that. We got writers in here. How many people are good communicators? We know that. How many good communicators do we have? I said, some sisters. Yes. How many educators do we have in the room? Got educators in here. Look at that. How many engineers do we have in the room? How many lawyers do we have in the room? How many doctors do we have in the room? How many law enforcement folks do we have in the room? How many activists do we have in the room? How many actors do we have? How many thespians are in the room? I'm really clear, sir. We have a thespian in here. Look at that. How many comedians do we have in the room? We don't laugh enough. My man. Make everybody. Look at the talent that's in this room right now. We have a web designer who could create a YouTube channel. We have great talent in here. We have engineers in here. How many religious scholars do we have in the room? Raise your hand, brother. All right. So we have scholarship, we have comedic timing, we have engineers, we have physicians, we have attorneys, make sure we're doing everything that's ethically sound. I think the answers, Allah has already placed the answers in this room. Why are we looking outside? We should be bringing people here to the Masjid en masse based on the talent that we have in the room. Allah has already blessed us with the resources.